The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you, first of all, for taking time out of your day to attend IPMA's webinar, Web to Print Best Practices. Today's webinar is sponsored by RSA and actually conducted by RSA, which has been a partner with IPMA for several years. I'm sponsoring, not only our annual conference, regional events, our luncheons at Graph Expo, and generously sponsors the actual awards of the IPMA Awards. So before we begin, I wanted to introduce you to Alicia Kaczynska and let her take on the presentation. So, Alicia?
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to introduce Vince Titino, today's speaker, and then I'll turn it over to Vince. We do have quite an agenda planned, and we welcome everyone that's here today. We'll also have a polling question momentarily as well. Vince Titino, today's presenter, is Senior Product Manager for Rochester Software Associates. He's WebCRD's Senior Product Manager, and WebCRD is RSA's web-to-print software. He's a member of RSA's management team. He works closely with our customers, partners, and product engineering to define what our product roadmap is, and making WebCRD a leading web-to-print workflow solution for implants of all sizes. We've garnered multiple awards under Vince's tutelage. He joined us in 2005, bringing over 25 years of experience in software and systems and consulting, and has 12 years of implementations to draw from. WebCRD's been around about 15 years, so we have quite a wealth of information to draw from and bring to you today. With that, I'll turn it over to Vince, and I'll jump in probably at appropriate points during the session.
Okay, thanks, Alicia. I'm assuming everybody can hear me okay. As Alicia said, we're going to have some introductions here. We'll do some setting of the stage. We'll talk about the best practice areas and follow up with some Q&A, and we have some resources for you at the end that'll provide a lot more detail. And now, I guess, Alicia and Karma, we're looking for a poll, right?
So I just put the poll up. Everybody should see it. If you would please help us benchmark this and select one of the following if you are an implant manager or, staff member in attendance. And I'll give you about another 15 seconds to do so. It's looking good. So we have about 70% who have voted. So I'm going to close the poll. So I'll give you the last second and share it. So there you go.
Okay, great.
Thank you for doing that.
That's great. Oops, trying to get to my next slide here. There we go. So setting the stage, so why are we talking about this? So from time to time we've had implant managers ask us for, more details on overall best practices, and it's kind of a long topic, but we have different and varying degrees of best practices for this or that or the other thing, or information on features, but we haven't really put together this overarching thing. So hopefully that's going to be helpful for everyone. Chances are most implants don't do this every day. Our folks here do, so we see it all the time, and we see what works and what doesn't work, and hopefully we'll be able to share that insight with you, and so that everyone thinking of doing a web to print or already have a web to print can maximize the benefits, right? Of course, this is going to be a high-level overview. We only have 45 minutes, so we can't dive into all of the different topics at the level that we'd like to. But we do have a white paper and a set of blog posts on all the topics that are going to be coming out that do dive into the topics a little bit more. So if we don't cover your your most interesting item, it'll probably be in one of the other posts. Also web to print, we're talking specifically about implants here. We're not covering commercial printers, all those other kinds of web to prints that are out there, or marketing portals that are specifically for, campaign management. It's not specific to WebSecurity, even though that's what I know most about. But I've served on a bunch of panels with all of the other web to print vendors, and I think we would agree on most of the points we're going to make here. But so it's kind of universal. I realize that every situation is different. Everybody's got their separate position, and we know that. And we realize that, although in this setting, we're hoping that you can at least take one or two of these points away and get some benefit out of it. And then along the way, we'll try to point out pros and cons of doing this thing or the other thing, so that we can get everybody informed. Okay, so we'll start with installation. So congratulations if you've already installed a web to print system, or decided to buy one. So the first thing you should do is kind of take a deep breath. You can do this even if you haven't done it before. We know a lot of people get a little nervous about, okay, what are the 1,000 questions that are going to come at me, and what do I need to do? Just kind of take a breath, and it's the old eat the elephant kind of thing, one bite at a time, and take your time, right? The other important thing here, too, is to make the implementation a priority project. We know that people are booked 110% with their normal job, and now somebody's laid on them the responsibility of implementing a web to print system. And then what more time do you have in the day to do this, right? If you make this a priority and set aside time to do it, you'll get to at the end of the day, you'll get to the ROI and the realization of the benefits that it can bring to you. But you do have to make it a priority. So potentially work with your management to make that point. That's one of the things that all of our all of the other vendors that I know about still make the point of you have to spend the time on it. One of the other things that's very, very helpful is to have somebody around who is what I call print shop technical. So they're good at the details. They know how to use Excel, and they can open up spreadsheets and do that kind of stuff. But they can also get to the front end of the printers, and they can do paper configurations, and they know how to set up print queues and all that kind of stuff. This kind of person, they don't have to have a computer science degree, but they do have to be a kind of detail-oriented person that can get into these things. And a lot of our successful implementations have someone like this that can make things happen. The next point is that, even if you're thinking of a hosted system, you still need IT's help. Most of the time for things like LDAP connections and user sign-in and all that kind of stuff. So the earlier you can engage your IT department, the better. Sometimes we'll get to we'll get to a sale, and somebody will say, "Well, we purchased WebSecurity hosted." The IT department will get involved, and they'll say, "No, we don't do that. It has to be inside of our system." So the sooner you know this, the better. And the smoother the whole thing will go. Another really important point to make here is that change and be open to change is very. I can't, I guess, stress it enough that when you purchase a web to print system, you're looking for workflow advantages and things that can improve the way you do business. And if you're not open to changing the way you work, you can't take advantage of the new features and these systems work. So be open to changing the way it works, even though you may not understand it. The implementation team will help you understand why this is the way it is, and chances are these features and the workflows have been vetted through hundreds, if not thousands, of installs and updated versions of the software. So we know these work. It's just a matter of taking advantage of them. That goes to the next point, which is sort of working collaboratively with your web-to-print vendor. If something seems to be broken, make sure you tell somebody instead of suffering in silence or kind of coming up with your own workaround. Chances are there's probably a setting someplace that wasn't set correctly or that can be changed to make things work for you, right? And by all means, make product suggestions and engage in user groups and forums and all that kind of stuff. I know, at least for myself, we take all of our customer suggestions to heart, and we make changes based on customer feedback. And if you don't tell us, we don't know. And so I would say make sure you let us know what's going on, and don't leave it up to the other guy. So we'll move on to the next topic. Rollout and launch. So one of the things in here that we've seen before is kind of this big bang, all at once rollout. Something to be avoided. Think Affordable Care Act, right? What happens when 1,000 people all come in at the same time? What seems to work much, much better is to pilot to a friendly group of users that or a department that can give you some feedback that you can pilot with, that your staff can practice with and learn the way the system works, and that you can make adjustments before then you launch out to a larger audience. You can, when you're ready and you've done your pilot and you've made your adjustments, we recommend people roll out in stages, right, to a limited number of users or departments, and then just keep rolling that out. I mean, we've had one school district that has 50 to 60 schools roll out 3 to 5 schools at a time, and what started to happen was people from the schools that they hadn't launched to yet were submitting orders even before they went through training and everything. So good news gets around, and that's actually not a bad problem to have, right? Also, people don't read instruction manuals anymore. In fact, some of the electronics you buy nowadays, come with a one-sheet how-to guide or how to start up guide. But if you want to know anything else about it, you got to go to their website or look at the videos. So videos have been very helpful. Introductory videos about how to create an order, how to do, and potentially one-page getting started PDF can always always be helpful, and you can make those available right from the home screen or the login screen that your users show up at when they first log in. Another good thing to do is ask for customer feedback. I know in WebCRD you can connect up your favorite survey tool to a link in the bottom of every email that we send to your customers, and that's a very handy thing to solicit feedback from. Most of the time, you'll get the negative feedback first, and you probably will see less of the good things you do, but that's the kind of stuff you want to know about and adjust for if you can sooner than later. So marketing and sales is another component of these best practices that we're talking about. We always recommend that you choose a name for your web-to-print system that's something that makes sense to your users, whether you call it ePrint or iPrint or print-to-print shop or graphic services, something that's not the standard name that the thing comes with, right? Also, marketing is kind of an ongoing project that continues beyond the launch. So you'll want to, have resources out there so that other people can see what you're doing. Hold on one second here. So anyway, so internal marketing help can also be very helpful. So you do typically have a marketing department, and potentially a learning and development department that you can take advantage of. You can reach out to those folks. They will be potentially happy to help you, right? In some cases, they're looking for new projects around the company to help with. One of the other things we talk about is to market to all users, not just the users that are currently using you, but all of your potential users, so that and you may have to change your communications between the people who know who you are and the people who don't know who you are. You can spend some time outside your operation as you're doing training, but also visit these departments and listen to their challenges. You may find that you can add value in ways that you didn't realize by visiting them and getting out there. So document and communicate the value of how you help them when you do that. So in one instance, we've had folks in hospital situations learn that the nurses were putting together kits of documents and to save the nurses time. The print shop took on that task and delivered fully assembled kits, which saved them money. So when you save them time and money. So when you do find that you can make an impact, you really should document that, keep track of it, so that when your director or the CFO comes looking around to make cuts, you have a clear case for the way you've saved the company or your organization money and time, right? Don't leave sales to chance. You need to have somebody responsible for this. This kind of goes along with this is not just at a rollout time. You need to kind of continue that. And make data your friend. I guess I'll come back to this point later as well. But you can use the data in your finance department or purchasing department to find out if people in other departments are ordering print from other folks or outside your company. Those are the guys you want to go visit and find out what's going on, and potentially they don't even know you're around. So I guess we'll move on to user adoption. So one of the things we realize here is that, and that we find is that change is hard for people, right? We've had print shop staff and their users be kind of concerned about doing something new, right? And we know that's sort of part of human nature. So it's something that you have to realize and potentially coach your staff and your customers through, and coming up with the reasons why you want to make this change, and convincing them in their terms. They may not accept it at first, but in the end, you'll find that, and what we find is that, after a while, people will come back and say, yeah, this is way better than what we were doing before. So some of the ways that you can help this adoption is to include your staff in the configuration process, but you have to be careful that you lead them and not let them fall back into their old ways of doing things. This goes back to the thing we had earlier, which says that you really need to think about changing your workflow instead of just doing things the way you always did it. So, be mindful of that, and help guide your staff into, taking advantage of being part of the decisions, but also make sure that they're embracing the change. Critical stakeholders and users. So if you have people that are using your system or your department a lot, you want to get their involvement early as well. Make sure that you keep them in the loop, tell them what's coming, so that they can then influence others, especially if they're people that like you, kind of like the pilot group. That can be a big that can add a lot if your critical stakeholders and the other folks that are already using you can tell other people. Also highlight the improvements that you're going to make to users in terms that they understand. So you may be very proud of all of the equipment you have and the things you've fought hard to get, and the things that that equipment can do, but to the users, you have to realize it's all about them, right? And they'll want to know, what can you do for me, right? And they may not care about the equipment that you have, even though it's really good stuff. They don't realize that that the things that you're doing for them are going to impact the way they work and the efficiencies that you can bring to bear. Lower turnaround times, higher quality, better cost tracking, all that kind of stuff, right? Holding regular sessions with customers can help them realize, things like new upgrades that you're going to do. Also, the amount of time you spend with them and get their feedback. Just the same way we take customer feedback, you take customer feedback and make changes based on that. Maybe you'll find some suggestions that you want to make to us from having customer meetings. So not only training sessions, but informational sessions as well. And then developing training materials at launch and ongoing. That's the same thing we talked about in marketing, but you need to think about it a little bit for user adoption. And what we generally see is that the adoption rate at first is kind of a gentle climb, but then as things get moving and as people get more confident with your abilities and the new system, new people will start joining in, and it'll be a more drastic upturn in the number of customers you have. Excuse me. There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about pricing, and we know pricing is a complicated thing to get into. There's lots of different operational models that impact how implants do pricing, and we see this all the time. We can't really tell you how to set your pricing, but we can give you some guidelines to make it a little easier for you and your customers. The first thing, make pricing easy for people to understand. If it's kind of a black art and things just happen, people don't understand it, they'll lose confidence in your system. Typically, you'll have a published price list that has different pricing that you adhere to. You can, in most of the systems, have different price cards that you'll make available for students versus faculty, or internal users versus outside work, or negotiated rates for high volume customers. Those are all great things, and you'll want to see that you can do an instant estimate 80% or more of the time, and as long as you communicate out to your users that the large jobs we're gonna estimate to try to get you a better price on, they'll understand all that, and be happy to work with you on it. One thing that we see that people sometimes want to do is they'll build in click charges into the paper and finishing into a sheet, price per sheet charge. That's usually a little harder to maintain And if your paper costs change, you can't just change the paper cost. You need to go in and change that whole per sheet cost and then do all your calculations to figure that all out. So we recommend that you separate the paper and the finishing and the click charges so that you can build up that cost as needed, so that when your costs change, and they always do, you can make the change to paper and not have to go recalculate everything, because it'll be separated out and then just built as it needs to. The other thing that that sometimes we recommend is to bundle in standard sort of labor rates for finishing setup as a one price kind of thing. So if you do coil binding and it costs you, $10 in labor to set up the coil binding, then you charge the $10 in labor as a flat fee, and you don't sort of make it variable. At least in our system, you can set up a flat fee for the setup, and then you can add a per piece charge as well to cover your costs, so that longer runs, build up more. That's really easy for your customers to understand, and it's consistent across all of your pricing, which is important. I kind of use the auto repair example for this. If I'm going to go change my brakes and I go to the repair shop, they're going to tell me it's $100 in labor and $50 in parts, and unless something goes wrong, that's what I pay at the end of the day. So now we'll get into production and automation. So I know I'm kind of generalizing here, but there are two different basic types of web-to-print systems out there as far as what the production capabilities are, right? Both of them have an ordering front end, but one of them is going to do manual printing. So that means you can either download the file, or it comes as an email attachment, or it comes in a hot folder or an FTP site, and you manually print that using a print driver. The print driver that came with the printer. The other web-to-print system type, which is what WebCRD does, is that it allows you to support fully ticketed jobs all the way to the printer, so that you're not using the print driver, you're not doing anything manual. The job shows up at the front end of the printer and can be released or in a hold queue without the operator having to go in and specifying which pages are in blue paper or different page sizes and different paper weights. And also the quantity comes out right there. So the second part of that is fully ticketed jobs to production printers is where you want to do automation, right? So if you're doing all the printing manually, then there's a limited amount of automation you can do unless you drop things into hot folders and use other tools. But that's not really the kind of automation we're talking about. So the first point I make here is that you want to wait to set up automation. This is kind of counterintuitive, but you really have to understand how the system works and how jobs are processed through the system before you start jumping into automation. That's really all that means. So wait a bit, make sure you understand how everything works, and then start setting up automation. Start with the simpler things and then add as you go. You can do the simple work that you get all the time. That can just come out of the printer, and the first time you touch it is when it's coming off the output tray. Depending on the kind of work you get or the industry you're in will be your ability to automate more or less, right? Some folks who are doing a lot of high-end color may have to look at every job and slow the process down. But we see a lot of our K through 12 schools. All the black and white work that comes in, if it meets a certain profile, can just go direct to the printer. And of course, all of your catalog jobs that you've set up in a catalog, you already know that they are set up correctly and ready to print So those can typically just go to print and come out. And this allows, by the way, this kind of automation allows you to increase your volume dramatically and keep your same staff because they're not doing what I call those non-value add processes like standing in front of the printer and reticketing a job when your system has already all the ticketing information available. So some easy examples, right? So black and white under, 500 pages with no or little inline finishing, like stapling can go directly to a designated printer. And in some cases you can say, these jobs with stapling go over to this printer that has the inline finishing, and the other jobs go to a different printer. Catalog jobs, same thing, black and white or color. Since they're set up correctly and ready to go, can just be sent to the corresponding printer with the correct paper or finishing equipment on the back end. So at this point, you've got your web-to-print system up and running, and you're starting to think about, okay, so what's next, right? So you're up and running, my job is done, you can sit down and take a break. Not so fast, right? Technology in today's world moves pretty fast. I mean, even if you think about the things that weren't around 10 years ago, Twitter wasn't around. iPhones and iPads are relatively new inventions, even though they seem to be ubiquitous now. I think the iPad was only introduced in 2010. So Android phones, HTML5, all that kind of stuff is new, or relatively new comparatively. So you still need to think about, what are the next things I'm going to do, right? So you can look for new sources of print, like we said. You can also, now that you have a system up and running, you can mine the data out of your web-to-print system, find out which departments are ordering from you, and more importantly, which ones are not ordering from you. So go out and look at those folks and ask them why, right? So another marketing kind of paradigm that you can get into. There are other services as you're going around the company that you can potentially offer. We have people offering variable data templates, business cards, event tickets. Some folks are bringing back work that they used to outsource. There's still a lot of people that do business cards outside that they can do inside. We have one customer who did doctor appointment cards, and they figured that they saved $30,000 in the first 3 months of bringing in the appointment card application that potentially paid for the addition of VDP to their system. We also have customers who are using a variable data template to take in 3D printing requests. So those are things to consider. Mail scanning and archiving, those kinds of things are not necessarily part of the web-to-print system, but they do give you an opportunity to, as you're out and about, increasing your reach and expanding your footprint, right? Another good thing to do is make sure you're involved in peer groups like IPMA. There's a lot of great ideas that come out of IPMA. I go to IPMA not so much to sell anything, but more or less to learn from the people that are there and see what's out there so that we can make sure that we're keeping up with technology and providing useful systems for people. Another good thing to do is make sure that you're up to date with your web-to-print software updates. As we said, technology is a very fast-moving thing nowadays, and even faster moving are those security updates. If you're not keeping your web-to-print software up to date, you're potentially missing out on lots of new features, but you're also missing out in those security updates, and security is an ever-present and an even more pressing concern at a lot of places, especially the banks and insurance companies that hold all of our money. So you don't have to take every update, but you should at least be involved and know that they're out there. You can see that by participating in, like we said before, the customer forums, all of the other avenues to keep communicating, right? Another thing to consider is getting print from potential other sources that you have coming in. That maybe people are sending you an email, or maybe there's another system that's that creates PDFs nightly and then sends them to you, and you're manually printing those. One thing to consider is to integrate that into your web-to-print workflow. So, like I said, at least in the case of WebCRD, there are APIs that will allow you to take that work and have it automatically come into your production workflow without having to upload it. The big advantage there is that it will then show up in all your reporting, right? So that you can keep track of it, you know it's there, and it streamlines, and it can then hit your automations if you have them. A couple of examples of that is that we have one university customer who's got these admissions letters that get generated overnight, and they were getting these in an email every night, so that in the morning they had to unpack all these emails and upload these letters and produce them. Using the APIs, those things come in overnight, and now they just show up in production, and all they have to do is release them to print and mail, and they're good to go. There's another customer of ours who has a third-party custom catalog system that they make available to their dealers. The dealers go configure their custom catalog, put in their brand, and then when they hit send and then it's done, that work also comes into WebCRD through an API and just shows up in production. So those are other good ways of doing things. The other things you can do after you've had this system for a while is think about, all right, is my volume large enough? Do I need load balancing? Do I need make ready? There are other custom workflows that can be put together, and you may even have an MIS system that you want to send work to, and there are usually APIs for that as well that can send the work over to your MIS system to be produced or to gather more data on. And then I think we're almost to our time. Alicia, are we good?
We're good. We have a summary coming up here, and then we'll be turning it over for Q&A, and we have some special bonus resources at the end of the Q&A as well.
Okay, great. So, in summary and some things to consider, like I said, I know we. This is kind of a broad brush, high level, but so here are the things that some takeaways that you can think about, right? Most important, set aside time to work on the project. We talked about carving out time so that you can get this thing done and realize the ROI that's available, right? Have that technical help available, including an IT contact. Be willing to change your workflows and help others see the benefit of what you're doing. Internal marketing is important, right? So the one thing I say is that you still might be in the basement, but with the internet you're only a click away, but that's if and only if people know that you're there and they can find your URL. So you really need to market even if it's internally to your own people. So the other thing here is also know your capabilities and how you impact the bottom line. You're much more than the equipment that you have, right? You have people, you have process and technology, and you can make make an impact on how people work, and you also want to track that impact, right? You want to do that trusted advisor kind of thing where even if you don't offer it, you want to let your customers know that you can make it happen for them, and they should be coming to you to ask, right? Continuous improvement is also very important. You always have to be looking for ways of making improvements to your processes. Automation takes time, but it's well worth it. And we have lots of examples of how we've impacted the bottom line of a lot of people where they can keep their staff and grow their volume by doing these things, and not have to add staff with more volume. And finally, get involved in all those user communities and industry groups, and please suggest improvements, because we need to hear from you.
So we have some follow-up resources. We see this as some really important content that will benefit everybody. So this is really just the start of the conversation. In addition to today's webinar, and all the attendees will be getting the free white paper that you see there at the top of the screen. We'll email it to everybody who's registered. The blog series just came out yesterday. It's about web development best practices. So it'll be 9 articles in total. The first, which was an introduction, came out yesterday in our blog. We'll include that in the note that we send to everybody.